Good morning and welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We talk of intellect, we talk of consciousness, but more often than not, when we talk of these two issues, we talk of them as jargon. And the jargon, when we use it, detracts from the real sense of the terms. What is human intellect? Let's not forget, a human body has three functions. It is crude, physical movements, physical progress. It's intellectual progress. The third is the spiritual progress. Now, intellectual progress would be intellect, and the spiritual progress will be consciousness. And there's a deep connectivity in the two. As far as intellect is concerned, it has two duties: to think and to remember. What is thinking? Human mind is a collection of ectoplasmic stuff. And whenever we create any figure in our mind with the help of that ectoplasmic stuff, we say it is a thought. The thought comes to our mind. To think means then to speak internally. And according to what we speak, we create a figure. And this process of speaking internally is consciousness, and that enhances the human intellect. Although different inferences have different implications for the human mind, but the two most visible implications are visuality and audibility. What we create in our mind, we speak mentally, and at the same time, we hear it mentally. That's the intellect. I'll go to utter. When you think like this, you utter this sentence mentally. I will go to Ottawa. And you hear mentally the sound, I will go to Ottawa. And at that time, mentally, you see the picture of Ottawa either as a projection of the actual external Ottawa or an imaginary Ottawa that you might have created. The imaginary Ottawa represents the consciousness, and the actual one is your intellect. Now, human knowledge or knowing is divided into two portions. That is, the compartmentalized object may be of two types, one direct and the other taken from the memory. It is said that knowledge of the knowing faculty is infinite. Absolutely correct. Is a human cranium infinite? No, it is something finite. Now, here is the curious dichotomy. The cranium that contains the brain is finite, but the knowing faculty is infinite. And that is because the intellect ultimately is connected with consciousness, which pervades the whole universe. Human brain, although it has immense potentialities, is finite. But consciousness and mind, they have no confines, they have no limits. Human thought waves and the human knowledge may be directed towards two subjects: the objective, physic, psychic stand, rather, the psychic objectivity, and the objective, subjective, spiritual stand. Now, spiritual, I don't mean and imply the spiritual, what people believe religiosity. Spiritual, I mean, where you are aware of your conscious capabilities, your ethical values. When mind becomes bigger and bigger, that is, you're enhancing the spirituality. And that enhancement of mind enhances your intellect. So, in order to serve the purpose of mind, both the nerve cells and the nerve fibers of the human brain have to become stronger and bigger. And this enlargement of the nerve cells is really the main issue. Normally, people think, well, and in Punjabi, there's a proverb which says that the intelligent people, the leaders, have big heads. No, they don't have. It is the mind, the consciousness that enhances their intellect. So, quite possible at one time the human cranium may be able to achieve proximity to the mind as far as the limits, the boundaries are concerned. But if that happens, would limbs and other parts of body become thin and lean? This is a curious thing, but it's a desired future for humanity because when mind is developed, consciousness is developed, intellect developed, you would find that all the great intellectuals were deeply conscious of their connectivity with the cosmos, connectivity with the consciousness. And the other psychic approach is objective subjective spiritual stance. In that case, what happens? You withdraw different mental faculties and make them pinnacle. You reach a height and keep on going up there. And when those mental faculties are at their apex, at the top, you offer that pinnacle human mind at the ultra of the consciousness. That is what I call the spiritual approach. Not meditating and going to a temple or a church or a gurdwara or a mosque and prostrating yourself. No, it is the pinnacle of the human mind and the deep connectivity with the cosmos. That's the real purpose of the human intellect and consciousness. They work in juxtaposition. There's no dichotomy, there's no diversion in them. And that is what makes them what they are. And in consciousness and the intellect, really, if the knowledge is there, it is subjective physicality. And that progress can be delayed. Some people have that subjective physicality of knowledge at one stage, others at the other stage. But it will not be blocked forever. Let's be clear. For intellectuals and for the human intellect to have its full play, spiritual progress or rather realization of the consciousness is always delayed. And the reason for that is that the intellectual body goes on increasing. But if there is no connectivity, there is no apex mentality, that goal remains far away. So when the ectoplasmic structure is enlarged, it becomes one with the cosmic ectoplasm. And the person then feels exalted. All those intellectuals, Kant, Hegel, even the spiritual leaders, really they were height of the intellectual, Gobind Singh, Krishna. They become one with the cosmic reality. And let's not forget, when I talk of the consciousness, it's something real. It's not a spooky mystery. It's not an illusory belief. It's valid and causally efficacious biological reality. What happens is, unfortunately, there's a so called intellectuals who are not connected to the reality of consciousness. They always call consciousness an illusion. And that's in turn fosters the impression easily among the general public that the way we think of our mental life, our intellect, has been shown by the science to be drastically mistaken. All the great scientists were highly, highly conscious and, in that sense, spiritual. Well, this is true in very specific and technical sense. Consciousness remains arguably the most distinctively evolved feature of mankind. It is distinctive to human beings. It enables us to experience the world like no other species on this planet does. The connectivity that the human beings have, and especially if you're intellectual, if you let your intellect have a free, unrestrained play, then you would find that you deliberately reflect on your experience and change the course of your life accordingly. And that makes you a real human being. There's a lot of confusion, I know, because most of our concepts hinge on what exactly we mean by consciousness, by intellect and illusion. Intellect and illusion, consciousness are not illusion. They are the reality of life. It's like, many times when the people are highly intellectual, they are able to connect with the nature, with the cosmos, with the reality. But when you are at the semi developed stage, when you have not reached the acme, the top, then you see consciousness as an illusion. So, in order to usefully fix your ideas, instead of meandering across huge literature in the philosophy of mind, consider a very fascinating essay for Eon by Kenneth Frankish. I was quite impressed when Kate Frankish made a distinction between phenomenal consciousness and access consciousness. Now, phenomenal consciousness is what produces the subjective quality of experience. And the philosophers call it, the intellectuals call it the qualia. This is what makes it possible for us to experience what is like, for example, to see red or taste a persimmon or write an essay on philosophy of mankind. The quality of qualia, subjective quality of experience. But this is only half the battle. As a matter of fact, access consciousness makes it possible to perceive things in the first place. And as Frankish would say, access consciousness is what makes sensory information accessible to the rest of mind and thus to you. And this accessibility of the mind, consciousness, enhances human intellect. Human intellect, until and unless it is aware of the consciousness that pervades the cosmos, is not intellect. It's like a donkey laden with the books. Who can carry the books? Who can quote from the books? But cannot in any way add to the knowledge and understanding of the mankind. So that's a major thing. Before you can experience what's likely to see red, for example, you have to be able to actually see red. How can you experience something without seeing it? So, access consciousness is a real thing, not an illusion. And very early in our quest for understanding it scientifically, we have to understand that. Perhaps the best known aspect of access consciousness is the visual system. Now, again, the visual system has two parts. One is the physical visual, the eyesight. The other is the sight of mind. So, visuality at two levels: one the physical one, the other at the spiritual one. And that visual system, one is a part of the central nervous system that makes you see around you. The other is the part of the consciousness and the mind, which allows you to penetrate the veil and see the reality. We know a lot about anatomical, physiological, neurobiological aspects of the system. But the consciousness aspect normally is neither taught nor understood. And that is what more important. Arguably, you can say that we have a complete description of excess consciousness. There should be something fundamentally amiss if we did not understand consciousness as a whole. That phenomenal consciousness underpins what we feel something, what is like to be what we are. So there's a fundamental divide in philosophy of mind, dualists and illusionists. The dualist and illusionist both agree at least on one point that there's more to consciousness which feeds intellect. I will not go into the subtleties of that, but let's not forget that dualism is a notion that the physical and the mental phenomena are irreconcilable. And that basically is wrong. Illusionists, by contrast, think there is a scientific route accepting only physicalism or materialism, meaning what they think, what is physically present, is the end of life. No, it is a combination of the two. Reality is that even the modern science now is now accepting that the parameters that govern mind are much too large, much too deep, and much too varied to be comprehended. And you can do it if your intellect can probe into consciousness, connect with it, and then you see what a joy it is. Let's not forget that the people have to understand that the terms by themselves don't mean anything. They don't. What really means is your ability to think, to penetrate the veil of the mystery, realize the facts of the life, and then understand that life is not merely animalistic. It has a much more capability. And that's why people like Aristotle, Cortella, Plato, Socrates, Dante, Hegel, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, to whatever school they might belong, were aware that there's no duality between intellect and consciousness. Consciousness without intellect is not possible. And intellect without consciousness is just a donkey carrying books. Now you decide what you want to be.